Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem.
They've been called the greatest generation. Raised during the Great Depression, they endured hardship and need and often sacrificed education to work for what little they could get to help their families. Then when their country was attacked and drawn into global conflict, they rose to the challenge by millions, men and women, to do their part to restore peace and fight for freedom. Honor Flight works to recognize the valor of these vanishing heroes. By some counts, as many as 550 per day are passing away. Through Honor Flight's efforts, World War II veterans are escorted without cost to visit the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Along the way, crowds gather to cheer the veterans and to thank them for their service. Bands play. Active duty servicemen and women greet the vets with handshakes and sometimes a little dance and maybe a kiss or an order.
Hi, my name is Jim Buck. I'm the captain on today's flight from Greenville, Spartanburg area up into Washington, D.C.'s Ronald Reagan National Airport. For crew members like myself, it's an honor and a pleasure to fly these honor flights. We look forward to them, we thoroughly enjoy them, and it's great to pay tribute to the gentlemen and women that have served our country. Myself, I was in the Air Force for on active duty for 10 years and 20 more in the reserve, so 30 years. I have a great appreciation for what these servicemen and women have done for our country. And as I said, myself and all crew members just consider this a real honor to be able to fly these honor flights for these former servicemen and servicewomen.
Recently, we traveled with Honor Flight Upstate, South Carolina, and listened to some of the veterans' memories of their time in service.
I was a Marine in World War II. I was stationed at Henderson Hall in Arlington, Virginia. I spent 2 years here, and during the time that I was here, President Roosevelt passed away, and I participated in some of the funeral things that went on, for several days. It was a wonderful experience. I made a lot of friends. Our compound had 1,500 girls. We had all been trained. I was a mess sergeant. We prepared lunch for our General Vandergriff, who was right across the street at the Navy Annex. And an experience we had with him, we heard that he was having his equal from some other country, and that person would be there for lunch. So we thought, all the services have a master menu, that what you have, they all have the same thing if it's available. And my CO found out that he had this guest, and she said, we can't send General Vandergriff a hot dog and a plate of potato salad. So we sent the butcher in to cut, some steaks and stuff, and we sent him a fabulous meal. The next day, we got a note from him, and he said, the meal was beautiful, it was delicious, but from now on, if we're having hot dogs and potato salad, that's what I want. He wanted what the troops were eating. I thought it was a very touching thing to us. Our barracks went right back into the National Cemetery, and every morning we would go out through the back gate of where our property was, and the gardener in the cemetery there had picked just several tubs full of roses, and every morning we'd go out and get those, bring them in the mess hall, and put them on the tables. We were a small group, and it made it very special, to be in such a wonderful place. we got to see the parades when all of the heroes came back. Skinny Wainwright, he'd been a prisoner of war in the Philippines, and they hardly gave him anything to eat, and that's where his nickname came from. But it was a time of activity, and if you had to be anywhere, this was the place that you could just know, of everything going on. But it was very special, and I loved every day that I was here. I was married first to a young man who joined the Marines right after the war started, very soon after it started, and he had been gone a couple of years. He was killed at Iwo Jima, so he didn't come back. So after I decided what to do with my life, and I went ahead and joined the Marine Corps and came to North Carolina for my training, and I met this young lady that would wait on me when I would come into Wilmington to shop, and a friend of mine was with me, and she said, "My brother's here. I'd like you to meet him. He's home on sick leave." Well, I never dreamed. From that moment on, my life was changing because we got acquainted, and I met his family and all. And when he got ready to go overseas, he was Army, and he was gone for a year. And when he got back, we got married. So we were married 68 years. We had 4 children. We have 4 grandchildren. And just a month ago, I became a great-grandmother. And he passed away just last fall on his 93rd birthday, which is a little bit unusual. But we just had a good life, and we look back, we both having been military, we just had a lot of memories that we could, recall, and we had that in common. And he was proud of me. He really was.
First landing, I believe, was in Belgium. Now Scotland. And there we went on to England and then across Channel. Went into the heart of France, and we got captured in Battle of Bulge.
How long were you a prisoner of war?
5 months. 5 months. Yeah, I weighed 178 when I got captured. I weighed 97 when I came out. So, of course, they weren't eating any good food either. The Germans back at that stage of the war, the German people were hungry, and they treated them like dirt, the soldiers did. I was back in the middle of the ocean when the war ended, May the 8th. They flew us out of there right quick after we got liberated. They flew us into Paris, and then we went to Camp Lucky Strike and stayed there. They allow you to burn everything, get mattresses and clothes and everything, 4 or 5 days, get off. We all had lives, Didn't get to take a bath for 5 months. So we were kind of dirty. The Germans went out to meet the American troops, and the captain and the Jeep driver came in, and the guards surrendered to them, and then we hid in a barn till American troops got through there. We had Russian prisoners with us too, and they would pick up a chicken and eat it raw. They'd catch them in the barnyard. And they tried to get us to a gap, and we wouldn't move, and they'd put that pistol right between your eyes and rouse Lusky, get up. Nobody wouldn't move, so that's when they sent the captain and the Jeep driver, and they come and liberate us.
My outfit was ready to ship to Japan when the war ended, and so they changed our orders and sent us to Germany on occupational duty. And my outfit was over in Nuremberg prison for a year. I guarded Hans Frank. He was right under Hitler, one of Hitler's main men, I think. We had SS cards in the hallways, and we stood at a little window, 12 inches square.
Yeah.
And guarded them 2 hours at a time. We was on 2 and off 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. Yeah, we could talk with them, and they would answer your questions if you asked them something. He was very, very kind fellow. But he seemed to be interested in writing a lot. So I suppose he was probably writing history.
We were so intrigued by some of their stories, we wanted to sit down with them and learn more about their experiences.
I joined in August of 1943. In October of 43, I was taken in the Air Forces and went to Keystone, Mississippi for my training, basic training. When I joined the Air Corps, the doctor told me I joined at Camp Croft in Spartanburg. That was the enlistment office. And the flight surgeon said, well, you're too short to join. You can't fly. And I had a little book that said I was 5 feet 3 inches, and 3.5 at the time. And so he said, well, I said, well, my little book here from the Air Force says you can join if you're 50 inches. He said, okay, go ahead. So I got in there and got in basic training. The flight surgeon called me into his office and he said, I want to do a physical. He said, see, I wanted to be in aviation cadets, and that's what I joined up for. And I wanted to be a pilot and a fighter pilot. Well, when I went to Keystone Field for the basic training, the flight surgeon said, well, look, this is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, look, you're too short. You can't stay in here. You're a half an inch too short. So he said, I tell you what, and I think he was just trying to help me. He said, you go back to your barracks, come back in the morning at 10 o'clock, and these were his exact words. He said, medical science says that you're taller in the morning than what you are in the afternoon. I think that was just something he did just to sort of make me feel good. Went back the next morning at 10 o'clock, 5 feet 3.5. So they washed me out of aviation cadets, said I could not be a pilot. Later on, toward the end of the war, they came to me. I'd been flying C-47s, NC-47s, as a crew chief, but they said, your records show that you went in the Air Corps to be a pilot. And I said, yes. And they said, well, we're running short of pilots now. Would you be willing to fly the rest of the war as a co-pilot on C-47s, what you've been flying, your same plane? And I said, but we can't give you a commission. I said, well, that'll be fine with me. I'd like to continue flying. So that's what happened, and I flew the balance of the war as a staff sergeant, as a co-pilot on C-47s, and we flew throughout the China-Burma-India theater. Actually, as I mentioned a moment ago, my basic training was in Keystone Field. Then they sent me to Seymour Johnson for additional training on a different type of aircraft. And there, the Battle of Bulge broke out, and they, in France, of course, and they were seeking all the men that they could get. So they called us up and said we were leaving. They'd taken us out of our training. I don't know what happened exactly, but we were called up, put in formation at headquarters, and all of them were called out except myself. Everyone left. It was one of the saddest parts of my career because I had to go back to my barracks and stay there by myself with no one else there. No understanding why I was not chosen to go with the rest of them. And I see them marching off in large formations down to the trains to be put on the trains to go to Europe, go to their, of course, port of debarkation, and then to Europe. But anyway, found out later on, I asked a question. I said, why did you put me back into training here a few days later? And the answer I got was, that said, yesterday you made 100 on your test. And so we wanted you to have you back in training. And finally they called us out one morning and said, in formation, they said they need some more men for a new squadron in Illinois. We want some volunteers. We were told in the military, never to volunteer. It was just a standard procedure, just a joke, you know. But anyway, the sergeant stood out there and he said, well, if you want to go to Illinois, step out. He tried that 5 times and no one stepped out. So finally, it got so hot there in the sun, I said, well, I'll just step out and plan to go. So he only wanted 20 men. So the others stepped out also. So the 20 of us went to Illinois. One of the best things that ever happened in my Air Force career was to go into the C-47 training there. We actually flew day and night training. They had smudge pots on the ground. The training involved this. We flew with the door off the plane, and our job was to fly to this area where they had the smudge pots at night, of course, and we were supposed to drop parapacks from the plane and see how close we could get to the smudge pots. The idea was that we were being trained to drop supplies to troops that were needed in combat. It was excellent training. The temperature was in Illinois at that time. I remember one night it was 14 below zero. It just happened to be anyway, after being there, they assigned us to a certain plane. They said, this is your crew. And we were supposed to leave the first day of that year of 1945. See, we'd spent a year in all this training, you know, in 44. So in the first year of 45, we were supposed to leave the States as plane, crew, and all, and fly somewhere to the either Europe or wherever we were going. We didn't have our orders. You don't get that till the last minute. And from there, they put us on C-54s and the large planes, and sent us to the Bermuda, Azores, Casablanca, Tripoli, Cairo. Of course, we were told that when you get halfway across the halfway across the Atlantic, when you leave Bermuda and we get on the way to Azores, someone will say, open your orders. Each one of us had a package of orders in our possession. So we were eager to know where we were going. Well, the person, captain or someone, who said, all right, you can open your orders now. Well, one second next to me said, well, I'm going to Europe. Another said, I'm going to Italy. I looked at mine and said, you're going to Tullahall. I said, where's Tullahall? Never heard of the place. And finally they told me that Tullahall was in northern India, and the Japanese had invaded Burma and gone into India and was within about 3 miles of Tullahall, so they were sending me right to the front. At least I knew where I was going. From there they sent me to Hadazari, which is about near Chittagong in India. It's right on the border of Burma, and that's where I really got involved in the major part of the combat work, combat flying. And there I was assigned a plane. They said, this is going to be your plane. I have a model of that plane now. It's a C-47. To me, this plane saved my life. It saved my life because it carried me through the entire remainder of the war. At that time, I didn't have a girlfriend, but we were allowed as crew chiefs, plane assigned to us, to put up whatever design we wanted to on the nose. If anyone can see this right now, it's got the name Lorraine on the nose. That happened to be my sister. So anyway, that's how it happened to be there. The squadron that I was assigned to is the 3rd Combat Cargo Squadron, and their insignia is right here on the tail. It's the inverted horseshoe with a 3 inside of it. Now, back in the States, we had toggle switches. You know, a parapack is just a big package, almost like a bomb, but it's underneath the plane. And in the States, we'd hit a toggle switch, and that package would drop off and get close as we could to those smudge pots. But overseas, there in Burma, we didn't have that luxury. We kept the door of the plane open all the time, wherever we flew, and whatever cargo we were carrying, my logbook shows that I had to fly to places called DZ, drop zone. It was our job to fly down. We'd come in, we'd have these supplies, and we'd come down within 300 feet, and we would kick the supplies out the door of this plane. We even carried 55-gallon drums of gasoline. We supplied the British with either eggs or whatever it might be. Some of the places we were able to land. And when I say land, we didn't have paved areas. These were dirt strips that were carved out of the jungles. And we would land there and unload the supplies. They have natives to unload them. But then, in dropping these supplies, one thing that happened to me that stands out, and each of these supplies had the parapacks that we had were inside the plane. They were not under it. So each parapack, we had a static cord that ran down the center of the plane. When we carried paratroopers, of course, the paratroopers used that to hook up to the static cord. But in this case, we hooked up the supplies to the static cord, and when we kicked the supplies out the door, then the parachute would open just like a parachute for a person. But we had these 55-gallon drums that we rolled down. They were stood up vertically on the plane, but then the pilot, and not the pilot, but the co-pilot and the radio operator and myself would take those 55-gallon drums, take them from a vertical position and put them in a horizontal position, roll them down the plane to the door. And we would kick those 55-gallon drums out the door. One day we had an unfortunate experience. One of the parachutes caught on the side of the door as it went out. And we had something, we didn't know what we were going to do at first. Something had to be done. It was banging up against the side of the plane, and this was high octane gasoline. If it hit and caused an explosion, we would have gone up with the plane. Well, we didn't know what to do, so once again, I was only 5 feet 3.5. I weighed only about 117 pounds at the time, and I was the shortest man on the plane. I was the lightest man on the plane. So there was no choice. We looked at each other and said, well, I would be the one to be hung out the door to try to cut loose that parachute. We had no ropes to tie to my ankles or anything, so the co-pilot and the radio operator each got a hold of an ankle and held me out of the plane. We all carried a large dagger knife in our fatigue, and I took it out and held it in my hand as I went out the door of the plane as they held me out. And there the prop wash was beating me back and forth against the fuselage, and there I was trying to cut the parachute to see if it could cut it loose so we could get loose from it. The pilot slowed the plane down as much as he could to cut down the prop wash of the propeller, but even that was very strong to keep a plane in flight. Well, finally I went limp and was hanging there, and so they pulled me back inside the plane. And we thought, what are we going to do now, because it's still out there? And I said, well, let me rest a little bit. And I said, we'll do it again. Well, as we lay there on the floor resting, because they had to rest too, because there was a struggle holding me there. And as we were laying there resting, we heard a rip, heard a little sound, a rip just like you would take a sheet and rip it. And we looked, I had cut a 6-inch gap in that parachute. and the wind had gotten in the 6-inch gap and ripped that parachute, and off it went. It landed among the enemy troops and exploded like a bomb. And we said to ourselves, we looked down and looked out there, and we said, well, it's really going to be surprising to the Japanese. They're going to say, what kind of new bomber do they have?
I was drafted October the 5th, 1942. The next thing, before we got on the bus, the First Baptist Church of Greenville's men's Bible class give everybody a testament, and before we left, they had a prayer for us. And then we left and went to Fort Jackson. That's where they took us and give us a good physical and all the shots and stuff that we needed. And I stayed there 5 days, and they put us on a train. We went to Indianapolis, Indiana, and then from there over to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And that's where I started my basic training. Then we went to Camp Shanks, New York, and we stayed there. They give us another physical and updated us, our shots and stuff. And we landed in Liverpool, England. And they took us, went down to Southampton, England, and left there on the 5th. They put us on the boat to go across to the English Channel. And in the meantime, we got a big bad storm. And it delayed the start of the war for a week and then the morning of June the 6th, that's when we started going in. I went in about 10 o'clock in the morning. They sent us in by mistake. We was not supposed to go in right then. We were supposed to go in the next day. We had a tremendous amount of aircrafts, fighters, bombers, and they was all dropping bombs and strafing and everything. And so that helped us get in because they couldn't do nothing, and they had P.O. boxes, and most of the airplanes tried to knock out those P.O. boxes because they had the big guns in them. And after they kind of got it thinned down, things kind of leveled off. And there was one thing that I'll never forget in my life as long as day I live, is when the landing craft let the front of the landing craft down, we was in water up to our knees, the ocean, and then we walked on in, and when we got on land and all, we were stepping on wounded and dead, running to find a place to hide, trying to keep from getting shot. We finally got our outfit assembled back together that night under darkness, and we got orders to go to a little town which was 21 miles from the beach, I believe it was, to Carentan, France, and relieve the 101st Airborne paratroopers had been cut off. And it took us 14 days for the hedgerows and stuff in France. And they got trees growing up on them, and the dirt is piled up about 4 or 5 foot high. And there's trees and brush and stuff growing on them. We didn't clear them out, we just worked our way through them and fought all the time. We finally relieved them, and we stayed there and held it till they caught up with us the rest of the war. And then we started in, and from there on, it was a rat race. We went into the Lauren Valley, and then that I guess was a couple of 3 months, and they pulled us back into a rest area, and we got a hot meal, got to take showers, shave, and clean clothes to put on. And then we got caught up in the wintertime in the Ardennes forest over there, and those trees were close together, almost like your finger. You couldn't hardly walk between them. And we had to make road, we cut trees and stuff for the tanks and stuff to get through. We was what they call advanced outfit, and we went in to take rough places that broke through and captured some and all. It was kind of like a suicide outfit. And we was on a bridge in Germany, and they blowed one end of the bridge out, and we just started on the other end. And but we finally took it and called the engineers and all in, and they come in and brought pontoons and put us a bridge across it. Some places you would fight for a week. You might take 100 yards for a week, and the next week you might lose 200. But we kept advancing all the time. That's why they named my division the Thunderbolt Division. And my outfit was named, they named us See It Through. Each man was like your arm or your hand or your legs. Everybody kept everybody's back covered and their sides. Maybe one guy was watching kind of the back, maybe another guy was watching your left side, and maybe another guy was watching the right side, and you was watching the front. But we had certain things that we could say that meant right, left, north, south, east, or west. And they would know. And we just made it up out of our own. And I got sent out on a patrol one night, and we're supposed to be back in before daylight, and we didn't make it. So there was 12 of us. That was what they call a squad. And we had to find us some places to hide where we could watch one another and see him. And I ended up in one end of a culvert that went under a highway, and another guy was on the other side. And the other guys was they had trees over there large enough and was rotted out inside. You could sit back up in it. and not be seen. And the troops and stuff went over us that day. And when night come, we got back together and come back in. And they give us a hot meal, and the captain told all the officers, said, y'all get out of y'all's bedrolls and let these men have your bedrolls. They deserve it. And we told them, had information on what the enemy was doing, because we were behind the enemy lines. After the war, there was 54 of us come back that could walk out of 592 men and officers. I was wounded in the Ardennes forest in the wintertime in the snow from what we called a treetop bomb. It fired it into the trees, and it first thing it hit, it would explode. And I got a piece of shrapnel in my right leg. And it stuck in there, and I tried to pull it out. It wouldn't come out. So I asked one of my buddies if he'd take my boot off and get my pants up, and I took my pocket knife and got that out. I took my first aid kit and used all that on it, and went back to the aid station, and that was as far as I got. And they was gonna send me back to the hospital. I said, no need of that, I'm going back to my outfit. I got up and left, went back. Took me a day and a half to get back to my outfit. I walked. We had first aid guys in each platoon, and they took care of me. But the main reason I went back, because I had as much experience as the next man in the company, because we had been hit pretty hard several different times and had new replacements. And I wanted to go back so I could train and help maybe keep somebody else alive. We was going up to the fight for the Elbe River, and my captain asked me if I would get in the Jeep with him and help him coordinate some of the stuff. And I did, and he had the Jeep driver, and him was sitting in the seats. The radio operator was sitting in the seat, operating the radio, and I was sitting up on the compartment over the right rear wheel. And they dropped a shell in it, and it killed them. And I didn't get a scratch on me. And the Jeep, it blowed it all, except where I was sitting. I guess I'm one of the fortunate ones, and I'm gonna give it all to the good Lord for letting me be right here and tell you this now. Because if it hadn't been for him, I would not have got through it. That's who I'm giving all the credit to. People would come out, they would have wildflowers, have wine, have cognac, and they would have different things, writings on posts, well, cardboard or different things out up in the, come up, if you was in a Jeep riding along, they would walk up to it and walk along with you and shake hands with you. And there were a couple of words they knew and knew very well. One of those was, have you got any American cigarettes? The other one was, have you got any American chocolate? But now the government in the military, in the war zone, they issued us cigarettes, candy, and whiskey, alcohol. Well, I used to trade mine all for candy. And I would give the chocolate to the kids. But my outfit, after the war was over, they transferred me into the 2nd Armored Division because they were going to deactivate. And I come home as a 2nd Armored Division man, back to the States. And after we got out of the ship and got everything together and they got us back, they sent us on the train to Fort Bragg. That's where I got discharged. I got there, I called home. I told them I'll be home tomorrow evening. That was the first contact that I'd had with them, except letters home. And my father and mother and them all got in their cars and picked me up at the bus station in Charlotte. And you talk about a celebration at home, everybody in the community was it when we got back to my mother and father's home.
Honor Flight has recently started accepting Korean War veterans as well. On the trip we attended, approximately half of the 95 vets aboard had served in the Korean War.
Yeah, I graduated from Mountain View High School in 1950. At that time, the Korean War, well, we knew that the Korean War was going to break out. So when we graduated, well, right before we graduated, several of us went down and joined the Greer National Guards. In 1951, my wife, Frances, she finished high school, and we got married in October of 1951, and then I got my draft notice in January of '52. But by me being in the National Guards, I did get a 1-year deferment from that. So I was deferred for 1 year. But then they drafted me in. I took my basic training at Fort Jackson. After I finished basic training, the Korean War was really hot at that time. I mean, it was having several casualties. So I got my orders. I was afraid I'd go to Korea right then, but I got my orders to go to 8 weeks leadership school. And when I graduated from leadership school, then I went to Korea. And we went in, they had ceased firing in Korea in July, the latter part of July, but they had not signed the truce. So we went in there and matter of fact, they put us on a train and they blew that whistle all the way from where we got on the train up to the 38th parallel, and every time they would stop or slow down at a crossing, there'd be a lot of Korean kids would try to jump on the train, you know, for us GIs to give them something, you know, chewing gum or candy or what have you. But they were really desperate at that time, and I asked somebody, I said, why in the world are you blowing this whistle? Don't let them know we're coming. Let's sneak in up there. The first night, I never will forget, we got in there, must have been about 9 o'clock at night, and it was dark. Well, at 3 o'clock the next morning, they hollered alert, and everybody started running everywhere, and this one guy said, go with me. And so I went with him, and we jumped in his foxhole, because you had to get in your foxhole, you know. But this one boy who was with me, he's from California.
And I think he was more afraid than I was, but he said, Lord have mercy, done wait till I got over here to start this stuff again. Naturally, my first, me young, as a matter of fact, I was 21-year-old at that time, but I was literally scared to death from sending us straight up to the 38th parallel because Chinese were still filtering into South Korea because they didn't want to get in there. But so we went up there on guard, and by me going to leadership school, I was a corporal when they sent me over there. So I was in charge of like a corporal of the guard, what have you. And we went up to, I know everybody has known where Pork Chop Ridge was in Korea. That's in between, well, it's on the 38th parallel between North and South Korea. So that's where I went and pulled guard there. We stayed up there on the 38th parallel for, let's see, must have been about 3 or 4 months. And then they'd bring us back to a little city called Weijambu, which was down about 25 miles south of the 38th parallel. But then we'd go back up to the 38th parallel at that time. So, but I was in the 25th Division, and their home base was in Hawaii. So when they did sign the truce, then the 25th Division came back home, which we had been there. I'd been there 14 months at that time. So we came back to Hawaii, and I got to stay there for 6 weeks, and my dad had cancer, and I had to come home on emergency leave. While I was in Korea, I was a recoilless rifle platoon sergeant. And they were short of rank in Korea, so the platoon sergeant, we had to act as a lieutenant, which is a platoon leader. So you had a lot of responsibility. And then I moved up to field first sergeant when I came to Hawaii. But it was an experience, something that I wouldn't take nothing for it now. At that time, though, I didn't want to go. Like every draftee, I guess. But I knew I had to do the best I could because I was ready to defend the country. If anybody's ever been to a war-torn country, then I think they would definitely be ready to go defend and keep them from coming over here. When I first got over there, they had just started integrating the South Korean soldiers in with the American GIs. So in my platoon, I had 4 South Korean soldiers in my platoon. Of course, they was Koreans are short and strong. I mean, their body, they got a real strong body. So me having recoilless rifles, 75s, and then the 105s mounted on Jeep, they really come in handy of carrying those weapons through them rice paddies, because anybody that's been to Korea knows there's a lot of rice paddies in Korea. The South Koreans now, they really thought a lot of us American GIs. Matter of fact, they was real happy to see us come in there. And even today, they still, every time I see one, and they know I'm a Korean veteran. We had a pianist up at Locust Hill, and she told me several times, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Ralph, for what you done." So they were appreciative for what we did. I made some good friends there, but it's something that, I tell you, as far as education, the 2 years I was in service, I guess I got educated more on the way to live life than I have the other 80 years I've been here.
Each Honor Flight trip takes the veterans to the World War II Memorial, the Korean War Memorial, and the Iwo Jima Memorial. After a tour through the town, the trip concludes with a stop at Arlington National Cemetery and a viewing of the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknowns.
Ready? Hey! Reason! Hold! 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 Ready? Hey! On your order.
Up and orders. Remain as directed. Orders. Acknowledged.
Ready? Hey! Reason. Hold. Right. Shoulder. Hold. Hold. Right. Hey. Forward. Hold. Hard. Hold. Hold.
Once back home, the organizers of Honor Flight make sure each veteran gets welcomed back the way they should have all those years ago.
It was just a wonderful experience, and today has been something that if I lived another 50 years, I would never forget. It's so organized, but just so, it's so heartfelt to see these, you know, these older guys. I'm 92 years old, and to experience something this late in my life that, you know, I thought was way past me, it's just been a wonderful day.
This is wonderful. I think this is great. I love it. I'm glad to get to see it. And I didn't think maybe I ever would, but I did finally. They did finally give us the opportunity, and so I was glad to get an opportunity to see it.
There's nothing you can do to adequately express appreciation to all those who are responsible for organizing and planning and giving their time and effort and monetary involvement for making it possible for the veterans to have this experience of going to see the memorials in Washington, D.C. I can never forget the experience I had when I went, and I'll never forget the many, many kind, considerate people who gave it possible for these people, these veterans, to come to Washington and enjoy the experience that they've had.
To all of our veterans, we say thank you for your service.
Hey, good evening and welcome to our special Nightline tonight, special Memorial Day Nightline. And I want to thank everybody that's given all or given some to the service of their country and for our freedoms tonight. That's what Memorial Day is all about. We couldn't do this program on Memorial Day because we're going to have tent revival starting Memorial Day, but we wanted to still honor those servicemen and women who has served our country. So just, you know, they did it without a care for their own being and their own well-being, and that's what it's they're just phenomenal people. I was talking to our guest, who I'll mention in just a minute, that the people that you just saw, they were the greatest generation, and without them, this country would be different, that's for sure. But what you saw in that first hour was an honor flight that happened just a couple of weeks ago out of Greenville. And joining me tonight is Paul Howell and Betty Stewart, who are the regional directors of Honor Flight Upstate. Welcome to Nightline, and thank y'all so much for doing this. It's something that's such needed, so needed for our servicemen and women. That's given, some of these people are just given it all, and some of them has, just served. So words can't explain it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But thank y'all so much for being here tonight.
Well, you're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
That first hour was just so phenomenal, and y'all were, of course, Betty, you said you missed, that was the only honor flight you've missed.
It is.
But Paul, you were there, and y'all have both been on multiple honor flights. Tell us about the experiences that y'all see with these veterans that go on these honor flights.
Well, what you see every time is the emotion of memories coming back. You see throughout the day a variety of emotions come over different veterans' faces. The memories coming back, the bad, the good, and then the appreciation that they have for the fact that people in the community think so much of what they did for us that we would give them the small gift. And it's a small gift, but it seems so big to them.
Yeah. Betty, you were sharing with us before the show that one of the gentlemen that went on the honor flight has recently passed since then. But that was one of the happiest days of his life, he said, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, Mr. Anthony passed away, I guess 2 weeks after the flight.
Wow.
But he had a great time. There were a lot of pictures of him with, smiling. He went with his son. His son was his guardian. So I think it was a great time for him.
Good. I'm glad that they got to experience that.
Our photographer told me, she came to the office the other day and said, who was that veteran that passed away? Because she had, I guess, a hunch that it was the one that she liked. There was a picture from the whole flight. Her favorite picture was the picture of him.
Wow.
When he first came into the airport at Reagan and saw the crowd there cheering him and welcoming him, because there's a crowd everywhere we go welcoming these veterans.
Yeah.
And there's a band playing pretty much everywhere we go.
That was awesome.
And so he just had this look, tears of joy on his face. And she said that was her favorite picture.
Wow.
And she couldn't believe that was the one that just passed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Jim Baber, our editor that put that together, his father went, and he was a guardian, and then Tobe Tolbert, the other editor, cameraman, he went with y'all. And when they first told me about it, I didn't know what to think, and I was thinking they just get on a plane and go, but they go all out, for these men and women, and rightfully so, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. Wow.
We have a police escort everywhere we go, all day long,
wonderful. And
so many other little things just to try to make it special.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about honor flight than some of the traditional Memorial Day, because this is something that a lot of people aren't familiar with. It's relatively new to the Upstate. When did y'all first organize honor flight?
2008 was our first flight. We heard about the honor flight program in late 2007. And so we announced it and started raising money and put together a board. And Paul was one of the first ones we called, because like-minded people who love veterans, that's what we're looking for. So we had our first flight in May of 2008, and we had almost 100 World War II veterans on it.
That's wonderful. And with World War II veterans and now Korean veterans, we're losing them by the day, aren't we?
We are.
I think it's so important that we celebrate them while they're here, not after they're gone. I was talking to you, Betty, before the show, and, we talked about the World War II Memorial in Washington. It was built, you said, in 2004.
Isn't that right, Paul?
Just opened in 2004, correct?
That should have been opened in 1946, in my opinion, Why we hadn't honored these people prior to that, Korea and Vietnam, and they deserve their memorial as well. But that's been there, for the Korean and Vietnam memorial's been there for years now.
Korea, actually, not that long either. It's, I think, the 90s, maybe earlier 90s or late 80s. It wasn't very much older than the World War II memorial, but it's just the way that generation was. The World War II veterans, they didn't ask for things.
Right. They were so humble, and they went when nobody asked them to go. My father was too young, but he reminisced many times about all his friends. I mean, they would just drop what they're doing. They sacrificed education. They sacrificed, relationships. Everything they sacrificed to go.
They lied about their age.
They did. I was thinking about that. And we did a veterans special a couple of years back, and one guy said he was 16, and I wasn't even driving when I was 16. And here these guys are going off to fight, and many die for their country.
That's right. Well, people ask us that you still have World War II veterans. Like, well, yeah, they lied about their age to get in, so they're going to be around a while, and we're glad they're going to be around a while, because we couldn't make it to get all these veterans on a flight if they weren't here, because it's going to take us a while still to get through our list. And we get new ones every day. Had one today.
That's wonderful.
Call up. Wants to have never been to see his memorial.
That's unreal.
I told him, I said, if I'm at one of the pre-flight meetings, I told the audience of World War II veterans, I said, if I'm 90 years old, I am not going to sign up to go on a plane loaded with people I don't know to go to Washington. But these guys are so eager to go. They don't expect it.
You told me that morning, y'all always have a meal at, or at breakfast at Hampton Park Christian Baptist. And what did one of the veterans say?
Yeah, he said, after watching the video, and he said, "Where can I re-enlist? I'm ready to go." They're ready to go again.
That's awesome.
They stand so tall and proud, to get in there with their buddies.
Now, what's all involved in getting together one of these trips? Because it's got to be, it's not just a bus that's good. I mean, this is a full-on everything.
Well, Betty stays up all night.
Paul stays up all night.
Working on getting our logistics together as far as the list. And then there's a lot of calls to be made, a plane to buy. We have to get a plane for the day, so we charter that aircraft. We have the police escorts to arrange the bus transportation. But the big thing is getting out in the community and just let people know what we're doing so that we can raise the money that we need for the flight, and to let the veterans know. And there's 100 people involved in every flight, at least 100 people on every flight to make it happen.
Yeah. And now you've started letting Korean vets come in, but primarily you're trying to get through World War II vets, because we are losing them by the day, right?
Our World War II veterans will have a priority on Honor Flight always. And so we will take those names first. We'll put them on the flight and fill in with our wait list from the Korean veterans. We have how many Korean War veterans on the wait list
We
now?
probably have about 150 waiting.
Wow. That's wonderful. Well, now, what was the ages on this trip here?
I think the youngest one, the youngest World War II, I think was about 86, and the oldest one was 94.
Wow.
And then the Korean veterans, the youngest one of them is about 78, 79.
Wow. So, and y'all take care of these people right. I mean, y'all do it right. So congratulations on that.
They have a wonderful time.
Yeah. I know Jim Baber's father, he was in the Pacific Theater on the destroyer, and just what they did, just unbelievable to go halfway across the world, and fight a tyrannistic enemy like that, and put them in their place. Thank God they did. So
that's right.
But they deserve it. But well, we're going to go to a song, and this is a good song. I really like this song. This is something my father did many years ago. But when we come back, we're going to talk about how you can get your family member that was in World War II or now Korea involved, get them on an honor flight, talk about some upcoming honor flights, and how you can get involved if you don't have a family member. You need chauffeurs, and you need, of course, any financial gifts help. Because I asked Betty how much a plane cost, and it was unreal how much to charter a plane. But right now, my father's going to be doing a song entitled "The Ragged Old Flag." Hope you enjoy it.
I said, your old courthouse is kind of run down. He said, no, it'll do for our little town. I said, your old flagpole is leaning a bit, and that's a ragged old flag hanging on it. He said, have a seat, and I sat down. Is this the first time you've been to our little town? I said, I think it is. He said, I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. He got powder burns the night that Francis Scott Key sat watching it, writing, "Oh, say, can you see?" It got a bad rip in New Orleans with Pakenham and Jackson tugging it, it seems. It almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag, but she waved on through. She got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville, and she got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg, and the south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. When Flanders fell in World War I, she got a big hole from Bertha's gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low a time or two. She was in Korea, Vietnam. She went where she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She waved from our ships upon the briny foam, and now they've just about quit waving her back here at home. In her own good land here, she's been abused, she's been burned, disowned, denied, refused, and the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. She's getting threadbare, she's wearing thin, but she's in good shape for the shape she's in, 'cause she's been through the fire before, and I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning, and we take her down every night. We don't let her touch the ground. We fold her up right. On second thought, I do like to brag, 'cause I'm right proud of that ragged old flag.
That's good. You can't get excited about that. There's something wrong with you. But again, I want to thank all our veterans watching tonight for your service and your dedication to our country. If it wasn't for you, then Channel 16 might not be on the air. I mean, we might not have our religious freedoms that we have today. And I really believe that, you know. There's been so many different, government uprisings and stuff. And I mean, we were the liberators of the world, but also the protectors of our homeland too. And so you fellas are doing a wonderful job, and ladies are doing a wonderful job. So keep it up, and all our active active servicemen as well. Y'all are doing wonderful. But I want to talk about how we can get our loved ones, our family, our fathers, our grandfathers that served, our grandmothers now. We had a lady on that trip, didn't you?
Yeah. I think we've had at least one lady on every trip.
That's great. That's wonderful. How can they get in touch, or what's all involved in that process?
Well, it's really quite simple, especially for our veterans if they're watching and want to call. I know some folks use the internet, some don't. So easy thing to remember is 869-VETS. That's an 864 number, 869-VETS. They can just call, and we will mail them an application. There's a 2-page application. They're not going to get turned away. It's not that kind. The veterans don't get turned away. It's just some information we need to hold their place. And first come, first served. We don't have any other priority other than we take World War II vets first, and then we move to our Korean veterans on every flight that we have on hand. And we usually have, I think last flight we had about 50 World War II veterans. And then we took around 50 Korean veterans as well. And it may be similar to that on our next flight. But that's a number they can remember. And of course, our website has those forms available as well. And it's really helpful if a family member of our World War II veterans helps fill that out sometimes. I know we have people that make it their job in the community to go and take those forms to World War II veterans that they meet and help them fill it out. And that helps them a lot because it's a 2-page form. And we don't want to make it too hard for them, but it's just some information we need. Our doctors require a certain number of things.
There you go. And that's one thing that would impress me. On each bus you have a medical doctor and a nurse there to take care of any kind of problems that might come up.
So we have a great partnership with our doctors. We have one of our medical team leaders is a doctor here in Greenville, and he's got a team behind him of doctors. In fact, we have more doctors than we normally can take. We're always signing up more, though, because we have had a doctor get sick once in a while as well. And they can make the
doctors get sick too.
They get sick
Not
too.
on the flight, but before the flight. Thank goodness.
Well, now you got an upcoming flight in October. Y'all are planning for that. Is it booked out yet?
I'll look to you.
Probably.
So people really need to get their name in the hat really quick.
They do. Almost every day when I go to the post office box, there are applications. And like he said, we enter those and put the date that they were postmarked, enter those in a database, and when Paul says it's time to start loading the plane, then we start making our calls to them. But we take them in order. And in certain circumstances, if someone's terminally ill and they're a little further down the list, but we know that, or someone has like macular degeneration, they're going blind, then we will possibly bump them up.
Right.
Just so because they may not be able to go the next time.
Right.
But in most cases, we do take them in date order.
And also the Honor Flight policy, network-wide, all across the country, is if there is a terminally ill veteran, just any war, any conflict, or peacetime for that matter, we want to take them to see the memorials. We will do that. So there are a few exceptions to those rules. I don't know if we've had to do that more than a couple of times, but we try to keep up with our list. Now, the Korean War veterans are very anxious, and we have a long line for them, but that happened in World War II when we first started as well. And I know Vietnam veterans are waiting for their turn.
But they're still young.
They are still young.
That's right.
But we have to remember, too, what they went through when they came back. And so we're going to promise them a very solemn but firm thank you for their service. So we're working on that behind the scenes as well.
Great.
So we're looking forward to that time.
That's great. Now, with the veterans, you require a chauffeur to go as well. Tell us about the chauffeur program. What's all involved there?
Well, it's we have Guardian applications. And so what we do is they'll fill out an application. If you wanted to go, you get a Guardian application. You would fill it out and send it in. And you may say, just like Jim did, is there a certain veteran you would like to go with? And he lists his father.
Okay.
And so we match those up when it comes time to start loading the plane again. And we'll pull that out. And when you're selected, we'll give you a call. And we'll tell you to bring your $400 Guardian fee and come to training.
Yeah.
And then you go through a one-night training class. And then we take you on the plane.
That's great. Now, so with the Guardians, it's a $400 fee, which, I mean, that goes towards expenses and everything. But in my opinion, to spend a day with guys like that,
with a hero,
it would be worth it, you know.
It is.
That's a minimal fee. I mean, that's nothing. But for the veterans, it's free.
That's correct. So as we're out in the community raising dollars for the veterans, 100% of the costs associated with those veterans going and what it takes to make this program work, that money raised goes to that program. That's why we have the Guardians pay their own way. We're not raising money for them to go because they're taking care of that. In fact, a lot of them raise their own way up there, so they'll raise the $400 themselves. But when you see Honor Flight in the community here in the Upstate, we are raising money specifically for the veterans and making the way for them to go and to pay for all of the tickets for the doctors to go and for the meals that the veterans will have and the buses that they ride in, the police escort in Washington. And so that's exactly what the money raised goes to.
Well, how can somebody donate money to the Honor Flight Society or have a fundraiser or anything like that?
The best thing to do would probably be visit our website or email us. I know you'll have that information for the screen as well. And with our website, especially, they can get some information about us. But the email address is a great way to go ahead and shoot us an email if they want to help sponsor an event, help volunteer, just come out. So right now, this weekend, actually Freedom Weekend in Lofton, Greenville is hosting us for a fundraiser. But we need volunteers to come out and help at that. So these kind of events come up and we get called by Chick-fil-A or Freedom Weekend or whoever it is, say, hey, come out. Well, we need volunteers to go do those things because poor Betty can't do them all. And my wife is going to kill me if I keep doing them all too. So.
Trust me.
So we need volunteers in the community that aren't necessarily flying to Washington or feel like they can, or maybe they did that and now they want to do more. We're llooking for those people actively all the time.
Exactly.
So it's something that they can just go to our website for any of those things and shoot us an email, give us a call, and we'll connect them to another event. In fact, 1,000 people got emailed about this weekend event, and I said, I need your help. And so we started getting the responses, and I think we're about to the point where we're good for this weekend.
That's good.
It works.
That's good.
People always come through. They love Honor Flight once they hear about it. So many people don't know about it yet, even with all the things we've done.
We have a wonderful team of volunteers.
Good.
For sure.
Now, y'all represent the Upstate Hub, but there is a national organization. So our viewership extends into Georgia, North Carolina, and down kind of towards Columbia as well. So if those people in North Carolina and Georgia want to get involved in Honor Flight or go on an Honor Flight, what's the national website that they can be redirected to the North Carolina, Georgia hubs?
They can go to, if they'll just Google Honor Flight Network, and I think we have it, we have it on the screen as well.
Honor Flight Network,
And so we have that web address or email address as well on the screen for them. They can always call us here locally as well if it's easier, and we will always get them in the right place. The network folks are close friends of ours, and they're a small knit team, sort of like we are, and they do a great job of taking care of getting people to the right hub. Now, I will say this too about Upstate. We did begin taking North Carolina veterans as well. Right now, there's not a hub in North Carolina.
So if somebody's watching in
right.
North Carolina and thinking, I want to start a hub, this is a perfect opportunity.
That's correct.
We'll tell them all we know.
That's correct. And Western North Carolina flies with us still, and they will probably continue to. The co-founder of the network, Jeff Miller, is actually helping to direct people and bring them to Upstate from North Carolina. And Jeff's a great partner of ours. He's who we went to originally to talk to about starting a hub, and now he helps us by bringing veterans from North Carolina. And we also take some from Georgia. If Greenville Spartanburg Airport is the closest or where they prefer to go out of, they can go with us. And otherwise, if they want to go of another hub, we can help connect them to that as well.
I got you. Well, Paul, why don't you share a story that's memorable about a certain veteran or several veterans that sticks out in your mind tonight?
Well, what's interesting is Mr. McClure, he was at the gala with us, and it's funny. He, of course, had a wonderful time on the trip. He had shared with me, I think he wrote a letter to the editor, if I remember. There was one I had that I read for a while, I remember, but it's kind of a funny story in this case. He went 2 or 3 years ago, I believe, and he had all these wonderful memories, and he's told me about them. But what he tells me now, every time he sees me or every time he comes to an event is, did you fly all the World War II veterans to Washington yet? And then I'll tell him, well, we're still looking for World War II veterans. We have some on our list. But what he's really wanting to say at the end is, well, when you get done, you need to start over. I want to go again. So he's checking to see if I got all the World War II veterans because he loved it so much.
That's awesome.
That he wants to go again. And we, of course, aren't doing that in our program at this time, but that tells you a little bit about how much it means to them. And that our World War II veterans will come out to our fundraising events all the time when we call and say, hey, could you come speak a little bit? They're there in a minute just because they want their friends, their brothers in arms to be able to go to, and they want to help the program. So I've never been involved with anything that's more meaningful to the people you're serving, to the community that helps you, and to the volunteer network itself. And so it's real. I've been involved in a lot of things, but this is one that really touches your heart every day.
That's good. And Betty, we were talking about before the program, all these men and women, they remember every little detail, don't they?
They do. They do. Well, one sweet thing, though, is that they'll call you up and they'll say, after the flight and say, this was the best day of my life. I had someone from this last flight and they said, well, we used to travel. The wife said that to me. We used to travel, but I thought that was over with. And now, she said, I think we can start traveling again.
That's great.
So if you can go to Washington and spend a day doing what we do, you can come home and still do some things in life.
That's great. Give the information one more time in case anybody missed it. Now, if they're handicapped, if they're wheelchair, if they have oxygen, doesn't matter, correct?
That's right.
You can take them.
We take them. We get the equipment. We have the doctors there. They're ready to help them out. So we encourage people to go to our website about current events for Honor Flight 2. We have several coming up soon, so love to have them.
So as your fundraisers, your different events is on your website as well?
They'll be on our website,
Excellent.
correct.
There it is on the screen right there, Honor Flight Upstate. And so check it out and give them a call. See how you can get involved or see how you can get your family members involved to get them to D.C. So that's awesome. And the changing of the guard, which we saw there at the last, if you've never seen that, it's worth going to D.C. just to see that. It's speechless. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. Those guys, it's phenomenal. And the way they treat the Honor Flight vets, putting them right there on the front row, it means a lot to them, I'm sure. So
it wraps up the day in a way that says they can come home now.
Yeah.
And when they come back to the airport, it's almost as if they're coming back from the war itself because they've gone and relived some of those memories. They've been with their brothers, and they've come back, and then the community comes out. And we encourage on every flight, when you hear that date announced, come to the airport about 8 o'clock that night and welcome back the veterans because if you can't go to Washington, this is the next best thing.
Exactly.
In fact, it might be just as good.
I got to do that this time. Instead of going, I was there to welcome them back.
That's awesome.
So.
Have you seen two vets that you've taken that served together in World War II?
We have. They found each other somehow.
On this one they did. And then we've had brothers. We had husbands and wives that were both served in World War II. So, yeah, it's really special for them.
They find out, especially, the thing I hear most often is, well, you were serving just down, a few miles from where I was serving. They may not have even seen each other in the war, but they know these places. I mean, you can imagine if you served in Iraq or Afghanistan, you know places there. Well, they know places that we wouldn't ever recognize, and they know, oh, you were just down the road from where I was serving. But, hundreds of thousands of troops in there, so they didn't see each other then. But they're all very often very close proximity to where they fought before.
That's awesome. So. Well, thank y'all so much for being here tonight. Thank y'all for doing this for our veterans. It means a lot to me just because, we're reaching out to them and saying thank you, whether it be just the minute part. I mean, this is, a step, towards what we could do, but it's a great step. So thank y'all so much for that. And thank you to all our veterans that served throughout the years and who continue to serve. Your service is just wonderful, and we want to thank you. And but we're going to have a song here in a minute. We're going to close, and be sure to tune in Monday night. We got an excellent show. I got my notes here. Let's see. Tent Revival. I'm going to run down the lineup real quick. We got Pastor Kevin Mayfield, then Terry Tripp on Tuesday, Benny Littlejohn on Wednesday, Dr. David Gallimore on Thursday, and Pastor Darrell McLaren on Friday. We're going to have great music every night, so you don't want to miss that. The tent will be going up in the morning, so stop by and see it sometime next week. Right now, Babby Mason's going to take us out tonight. God bless the USA.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I've worked for all my life, I would be content with my children. I'd want to be just one man's wife. And I thank my God above to be living here today, where the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll proudly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, from Atlanta to LA, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll proudly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't